He invited her to humiliate her, but her first move checkmated his entire empire. Welcome to Tales by Ori and Dot. Let's uncover what really happened. The air in the Pinnacle Core boardroom was a carefully calibrated mixture of old leather, polished mahogany, and the faint, metallic scent of ambition. It was a room designed to intimidate, its soaring windows offering a godlike view of the sprawling city below, its walls adorned with abstract art that cost more than the annual salaries of most of the company's employees. At the head of the massive table, in a chair that was more a throne than a piece of furniture, sat Mr. Alistair Sterling, the company's celebrated and feared CEO. Sterling was a man who believed in hierarchies, in pedigree, and in the immutable fact of his own brilliance. He was a master of the corporate game, a charismatic tyrant who could charm investors and eviscerate underlings with equal, chilling precision. His one great vanity, apart from his collection of vintage sports cars, was his reputation as an unbeatable chess player. He often hosted a CEO's chess challenge in the boardroom, a performative display where he would systematically dismantle some hand-picked, usually sycophantic, executive, all while pontificating on the parallels between chess strategy and corporate dominance. It was less a game and more a public execution, designed to reinforce his intellectual supremacy. On this particular Tuesday afternoon, the chosen lamb for the slaughter was a nervous-looking vice president from the marketing department. Across the room, moving with a quiet efficiency that rendered him almost invisible, was Marco, the head of the evening cleaning crew. A man in his late 50s, with kind, weary eyes and hands worn from a lifetime of hard, honest work. Marco was a fixture at Pinnacle Corp, a silent witness to the comings and goings of the powerful. Tonight, however, was different. With him, sitting quietly on a small stool near the service entrance, was his daughter, a bright, inquisitive 10-year-old girl named Isabella, whom he'd had to bring to work due to a last-minute babysitting cancellation. Isabella, with her wide, observant eyes and a worn copy of a children's book in her lap, watched the proceedings with a fascination that was entirely missed by the room's self-important occupants. Sterling, his victory over the hapless VP, swift and brutal, was in a particularly self-congratulatory mood. He surveyed the room, his gaze sweeping over his cowed executives, and then, with a flicker of cruel amusement, it landed on Marco and Isabella. Well, Marco, Sterling boomed, his voice dripping with condescension. Introducing a new generation to the hallowed halls of Pinnacle Corp, are we? Instilling the virtues of hard work from a young age? I see. His loyal VPs chuckled appreciatively. Marco, flustered and embarrassed, stood straighter. My apologies, Mr. Sterling. My daughter, Isabella. Our sitter was unwell. She will be no trouble, sir. Sterling's gaze shifted to Isabella, who looked back at him not with fear, but with a quiet, steady curiosity. He noticed the book in her lap. Reading, are we? Excellent. A mind, even a simple one, is a terrible thing to waste. He then had an idea, a flash of inspiration born from arrogance and boredom. It would be a perfect, final flourish to his afternoon of dominance. Tell you what, Marco, he said, a magnanimous, yet utterly patronizing, smile spreading across his face. In the spirit of corporate education, why don't we let your little girl have a go? A real-life lesson in strategy from the CEO himself. What do you say, Isabella? Ever played chess before? He gestured to the ornate, hand-carved ivory chess set on the table, a set that was a famous part of his corporate legend. The executives around the table exchanged amused, incredulous glances. This was a new level of performative cruelty from Sterling, inviting the janitor's daughter to play chess as a public joke. Marco looked horrified. Oh no, Mr. Sterling, sir. She wouldn't know how. It is not appropriate. Sterling waved a dismissive hand. Nonsense, Marco. It will be a charming anecdote for my next shareholder address. A story of mentorship, of reaching across the corporate ladder. Come now, Isabella, he beckoned. Don't be shy. I promise I'll go easy on you. Isabella looked at her father, who gave a slight, helpless shake of his head. Then, she looked at the chessboard, a a flicker of something unreadable in her wide, dark eyes. Slowly, she stood, placed her book carefully on her stool, and walked towards the massive mahogany table. The room was silent, save for a few suppressed snickers. The CEO, the titan of industry, was about to play chess with the janitor's 10-year-old daughter. No one in that room could possibly have imagined that they were about to witness a single, breathtaking move that would not only leave their arrogant CEO utterly stunned, but would also set in motion a series of events that would change the very foundations of Pinnacle Corp forever. For Isabella, you see, had a secret, and that secret was about to be revealed, one devastatingly precise move at a time. Have you ever seen it? That moment when a person, dismissed and underestimated, suddenly reveals a hidden, extraordinary talent that leaves everyone speechless? It happens in offices, in classrooms, on playing fields, in boardrooms all over the world. A quiet janitor, a shy intern, a 10-year-old girl with a book. Sometimes, the most powerful players are the ones you never, ever see coming. The atmosphere in the Pinnacle Corp boardroom was thick with a mixture of sycophantic amusement and mild embarrassment. The executives, taking their cue from Sterling, settled back in their plush leather chairs, ready to enjoy the spectacle of their boss patronizing a small child. It was a perfect, almost theatrical demonstration of his power, his supposed magnanimity, his complete control over every person and every situation within his domain. Isabella, small for her age, had to be helped into the massive chair opposite Sterling, her feet dangling a good 6 inches from the floor. She looked tiny and out of place, a small, quiet sparrow seated opposite a preening eagle. The contrast was stark and to Sterling deeply satisfying. "All right, Isabella," he said, his voice oozing a false, avuncular warmth that made Marco, standing rigidly by the wall, flinch. "The white pieces, as is traditional, move first. That will be me, of course. A small lesson in historical precedent." He opened with a classic king's pawn opening, a solid, standard move. He then looked up, a condescending smile playing on his lips. "Your turn, my dear. Don't be afraid. Just move one of your little soldiers." Isabella looked at the board, her small face a mask of concentration. Her eyes, wide and dark, scanned the pieces, not with the random, unfocused gaze of a novice, but with a strange, unnerving intensity. For a long moment, she didn't move. The executives began to shift in their seats, a few sharing knowing smirks. The joke, it seemed, was that the child was too intimidated to even make a move. "It's all right, sweetheart," Sterling cooed. "Take your time. We have all afternoon." Isabella finally reached out a small, steady hand. She didn't move a pawn, as Sterling and everyone else expected. Instead, her fingers closed around her knight. With quiet precision, she moved it from G8 to F6. It was a sophisticated, if standard, response to Sterling's opening, the Indian defense, a complex and highly theoretical system favored by grandmasters. A flicker of surprise, so fleeting it was almost imperceptible, crossed Sterling's face. He quickly masked it with a chuckle. "A bold move. The knight's gambit. Very unorthodox. I like your spirit." He clearly assumed it was a random, lucky choice, a child picking a piece that looked like a horse. He made his second move, advancing another pawn to control the center of the board, a classic, textbook continuation. It was Isabella's turn again. She paused for only a few seconds this time before making her move, another precise, theoretically sound response that seamlessly continued the Indian defense line. Sterling's smile faltered slightly. This was unusual. He made his third move, still on solid, well-established ground. Isabella responded almost instantly, her move not just sound, but subtle, a quiet challenge to Sterling's central control. A low murmur rippled through the assembled executives. This was no longer just a joke. The child was playing actual chess. Well, Sterling said, his voice a little tighter now, his patronizing tone beginning to fray at the edges. "It seems we have a budding prodigy in our midst. Marco, you didn't tell us you were raising a little champion." Marco himself looked as bewildered as anyone, a mixture of pride and profound anxiety on his face. He knew his daughter was bright, that she loved the old, worn chess set her grandfather had left her, but he had no idea of this level of skill. The game continued. For the next 10 moves, Sterling, now playing with a more serious, focused intent, tried to assert his dominance, to throw Isabella off her game with aggressive, tactical plays. But for every attack, Isabella had a defense. For every threat, a counter. She played with a quiet, unnerving calm, her moves economical, precise, and deeply, profoundly strategic. She wasn't just reacting to Sterling. She was anticipating him, subtly shaping the flow of the game, guiding him down pathways he hadn't foreseen. The atmosphere in the room had transformed completely. The amusement was gone, replaced by a stunned, almost fearful silence. The executives were no longer watching a CEO humor a child. They were witnessing a genuine, high-level chess match, and the child, impossibly, was holding her own against their feared and supposedly brilliant leader. Sterling, for his part, was now sweating, a faint sheen of perspiration on his brow. His earlier confidence had evaporated, replaced by a growing, horrifying sense of being outmaneuvered, outthought by a 10-year-old girl in a simple cotton dress. He was the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar corporation, a titan of industry, a man whose intellect was the stuff of company legend. And he was being systematically, quietly, brilliantly dismantled by the janitor's daughter. He was so focused on the board, on trying to fend off Isabella's subtle, suffocating pressure, that he failed to notice the discreet arrival of another figure at the back of the room, a woman who had been observing the proceedings from the doorway with a look of quiet, intense interest. The turning point of the game, and indeed of the entire afternoon, arrived at move 17. Alistair Sterling, his face now flushed with a mixture of frustration and disbelief, had been trying for the last 5 moves to force a weakness in Isabella's position, to create an opening for his powerful queen and rooks. He was used to opponents who crumbled under his relentless pressure, who made mistakes born of fear. But Isabella made no mistakes. Her defense was like a fortress of quiet, unbreachable logic. Now, after a long, agonizing pause, Sterling made his move. He advanced his queen to c4, a seemingly powerful, multi-pronged attack that threatened a pawn, put pressure on her knight, and appeared to set up a devastating checkmate sequence. It was a classic Sterling move, aggressive, flashy, designed to intimidate and overwhelm. He sat back in his throne-like chair, a flicker of his old arrogance returning, a faint, triumphant smirk touching his lips. He believed he had finally found the fatal flaw, the chink in the armor of this unnerving, silent child. "There now, Isabella," he said, his voice regaining some of its patronizing condescension, though it now carried a brittle edge. "A complex situation. That, my dear, is what we call a fork. A difficult problem to solve. Perhaps it is time to concede." The executives around the table, who had been watching with a kind of horrified fascination, let out a collective, nervous breath. They, too, saw the power of Sterling's move. It looked decisive. Isabella looked at the board, her small face impassive. Her eyes traced the lines of power, the vectors of threat, the intricate web of possibilities. She was utterly still for a full minute, her concentration so absolute that it seemed to create a pocket of silence around her. Then, she reached out her hand. She didn't move her threatened knight. She didn't try to defend the pawn. Instead, in a move of such breathtaking, counterintuitive brilliance that it would later be whispered about in the hushed corridors of Pinnacle Corp for years to come, she ignored Sterling's threats entirely. She advanced her own rook, a piece that had been sitting quietly on the back rank, to d3. Rook to d3. The move, at first glance, seemed insane, a non sequitur. It didn't address any of Sterling's immediate threats. It appeared to do nothing. A few of the executives exchanged confused glances. Had the child finally cracked under the pressure? Sterling himself stared at the board, a frown of puzzlement on his face. Then, slowly, horribly, the full, devastating implications of her move began to dawn on him. Isabella's rook, now sitting on d3, had created a pin. A catastrophic, game-ending pin. It locked his bishop to his king, rendering it useless. But that was just the beginning. The rook also created a discovered attack. By moving her knight on her next turn, Isabella would unleash a check from her other rook, while her knight simultaneously captured Sterling's queen. It was a combination of such profound, multi-layered tactical genius, a move so subtle and yet so utterly crushing, that Sterling felt the blood drain from his face. He had been so focused on his own aggressive, flashy attack that he had been completely blind to the subtle, inescapable trap Isabella had been patiently, quietly weaving for the last 5 moves. He had walked right into it, like a blustering fool into a perfectly laid snare. That move, one of the VPs, an amateur chess player himself, whispered, his voice filled with awe. It's a sacrifice, a discovered check, a royal fork, all at once. It's perfect. Sterling could see it now. He was completely, hopelessly lost. There was no defense. No escape. Checkmate was not just inevitable. It was a mere formality. He had been so comprehensively, so elegantly, defeated that there was nothing left for him to do. He looked up from the board, his eyes wide with a kind of terrified respect, and stared at the 10-year-old girl sitting opposite him. And it was in that moment of his utter humiliation that the quiet woman who had entered the room a few minutes earlier chose to speak, her voice calm, cultured, and carrying an unmistakable weight of authority. A remarkable demonstration of the Najor variation of the Sicilian defense. Wouldn't you agree, Mr. Sterling? She said. Particularly that fianchettoed bishop on G7. A classic, but so rarely seen executed with such precision by CEO. Alistair Sterling looked up, and his world, for the second time that afternoon, collapsed. Standing by the door, a faint, enigmatic smile on her face, was a woman he recognized from the society pages and the most exclusive, high-powered charity galas. She was Ms. Anya Petrova, the notoriously reclusive, almost mythical, matriarch of the Petrova family, a dynasty whose vast, silent fortune was rumored to rival that of small nations, and who, as Sterling now recalled with a jolt of pure, ice-cold terror, was the grandmother of the quiet, unassuming data analyst he had so arrogantly, so publicly, so catastrophically fired just 3 weeks prior. And standing beside her, holding her hand, was her granddaughter, Elena. The appearance of Anya Petrova, the formidable and rarely seen matriarch of a financial dynasty, in the Pinnacle Core boardroom, was like the sudden materialization of a deity from a forgotten, more powerful pantheon. Alistair Sterling, already reeling from his humiliating defeat at the hands of a 10-year-old girl, now felt a new, more profound wave of terror wash over him. He knew who she was. Everyone in the upper echelons of global finance knew who she was, or rather, knew of her. She was a legend, a woman who had inherited a vast industrial empire from her late husband, and, through decades of shrewd, silent, and often ruthless maneuvering, had multiplied its value tenfold, her influence extending into boardrooms and government corridors across the globe. And beside her stood Elena, the quiet data analyst he had so contemptuously dismissed, her expression now calm and unreadable. The puzzle pieces, scattered in confusing moments before, now snapped into place with horrifying, sickening clarity. The janitor's daughter, Isabella, Marco, the chess game, it all suddenly felt like a meticulously orchestrated prelude to his own execution. Ms. Petrova, Sterling stammered, scrambling to his feet, his earlier bravado completely gone, replaced by a fawning, desperate obsequiousness. What an unexpected honor. I had no idea you were in the building. Anya Petrova advanced slowly into the room, her movements graceful, her gaze sweeping over the stunned executives before settling, with chilling intensity, on Sterling. I'm often in places you have no idea of, Mr. Sterling, she said, her voice soft but carrying an edge of polished steel. It is how I stay informed. She gestured towards the chessboard, then towards Isabella, who had now slipped out of her chair and stood quietly beside her father, Marco. My young friend here, Isabella, has just provided a most illuminating demonstration. A lesson in seeing the whole board, in understanding that the most powerful pieces are not always the ones that make the most noise. A lesson, I fear, that has been sorely lacking in the leadership of this company. Sterling swallowed hard, a cold sweat breaking out on his brow. I don't understand. Oh, I think you do, Anya said, her smile vanishing. She then turned to Marco, and her entire demeanor softened, the icy matriarch replaced by a woman of genuine warmth and respect. Marco, my friend, she said, in a language Sterling did not understand, but which was clearly their shared native tongue. I am sorry you and your daughter were subjected to this boorish display. Your grandfather, she said, now looking at Isabella with affectionate pride, would have been very proud of you today. He was the finest chess master I ever knew, and he taught you well. She then switched back to flawless, unaccented English, her attention once again fixed on the terrified CEO. You see, Mr. Sterling, Marco's grandfather was not just a cherished friend of my late husband. He was a strategic genius, a man whose insights into game theory and human nature were legendary in certain circles. A man to whom I and my family owe a debt of honor. When Marco came to this country after the political upheavals in his homeland, I made it my business to ensure he found safe, respectable work. I had assumed, she added, her voice dropping, that he would be treated with dignity here. It seems I was mistaken. She then looked at her granddaughter, Elena. And you, Mr. Sterling, also had the singular misjudgment of publicly humiliating and firing my granddaughter, Elena Petrova, a woman whose analytical skills in identifying corporate rot are, I can assure you, even more formidable than young Isabella's skills at chess. The final pieces of the puzzle clicked into place for everyone in the room. The executives stared, their faces a mixture of awe and terror. This wasn't just a corporate visit, it was a dynastic reckoning. Elena's report on your creative accounting and your disastrously misguided Project Chimera, Anya continued, was, shall we say, deeply troubling to my family's investment trust, which as of last Thursday, quietly acquired a 35% stake in Pinnacle Corp, making us the single largest shareholder. Sterling looked as if he might faint. His world wasn't just collapsing. It was being systematically, strategically, and personally dismantled. My granddaughter's recommendation, Anya said, her gaze now utterly devoid of any warmth, was that a change in leadership at Pinnacle Corp was not just advisable, but essential for the company's long-term survival. After witnessing your performance this afternoon, Mr. Sterling, your arrogance, your cruelty, your utter lack of judgment, I am inclined to agree with her assessment. Wholeheartedly. She then turned to the other board members, who were now looking at Sterling as if he were a dead man walking. Ladies and gentlemen of the board, I will be calling for an emergency session tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. The primary, and indeed only, item on the agenda will be the immediate removal of Mr. Alastair Sterling as Chief Executive Officer and the appointment of a new interim leadership team.